The last time my grandpa went this quiet, he was building a potato cannon in 1998. This time, Karen parked spy trucks in our garage without asking. By nightfall, she was soaked by motion sprinklers. By week's end, she was on a federal watch list, all because she underestimated an old man with a lawn gnome, a net launcher, and absolutely no patience for clipboard tyranny. It started with the sound of war, not bullets, not bombs, just a thunderous metallic slam that echoed through the cul-de-sac like a cannon blast aimed at suburbia itself. Every bird in Briarwood Hills took off like synchronized fighter jets. A neighbor dropped his latte. Somewhere, a car alarm howled like it had PTSD. And right there in our driveway stood my grandpa, Frank Miller, 77 years old, Marine Corps vet, garage door slammer extraordinaire, declaring suburban warfare with a padlock and a vengeance. That morning had started with muffins, not the good kind. These were store-bought, gluten-free, insultingly dry blueberry pucks that could double as hockey pucks. They came in a box left on our porch with a handwritten note taped to the top. Friendly reminder, your trash bins were out past collection again. Also, per temporary ordinance 47B, I'll be using your garage for HOA equipment this week. Much appreciated. No signature needed. Everyone knew who it was. Karen, Charlene Delaney, HOA president, clipboard commander, self-appointed queen of Briarwood Hills. Grandpa stared at the note like it personally insulted the Constitution. She's testing boundaries, he said, pacing the kitchen like a general before battle. Next thing you know, she'll rename the living room a community meeting hall and charge rent for breathing. I laughed. I thought he was joking. I mean, who just claims someone else's garage? Turns out Karen does. At exactly 9:17 IEM, 2 trucks rolled in. Big, boxy commercial trucks with matte paint, one black, one gray, no company logos. Just a tiny HOA sticker on the back, like that made it all okay. Karen waved from her Lexus like she was leading a home invasion parade. The drivers didn't knock. They just opened our garage and backed them in like they owned the place. For 2 full minutes, Grandpa didn't say a word, which for him is like a tornado taking a coffee break. Then he turned to me with that glint in his eye, the one I'd seen only once before when he outfished a cheating mayor during a county fair bass tournament. "Get me the padlocks, boy," he said, and I obeyed. When a man who once disarmed a homemade firework with duct tape and a shoelace asks for padlocks, you don't ask questions, you move. What followed was a symphony of clanking metal, chains, zip ties, and a metal bar that looked like it belonged in a medieval castle. Grandpa didn't just lock the garage, he sealed it like a tomb. Then he stepped back, wiped his hands on a rag, and muttered, "Let's see her ordinance override that." 20 minutes later, she returned, carrying pink blazer, hair like weaponized cotton candy, clipboard held like a scepter of suburban justice. She stopped at the end of the driveway, tilted her head like a disappointed librarian, and said with saccharine venom, "Frank, you can't legally obstruct HOA access to designated storage." Grandpa didn't flinch. He just lifted his phone. "Sheriff, yeah. Got 2 unidentified vehicles illegally parked in my garage. It might be part of a hostile acquisition, or maybe domestic terrorism. Can't say for sure these days." Karen blinked. The birds didn't chirp. Even the wind seemed to pause. And I swear in that moment I saw the tiniest crack in her smile, a flicker of something rare. Fear. The sheriff showed up exactly 11 minutes later, which in Briarwood Hills time is basically a SWAT response. Sheriff Ray Duncan, mid-50s, sun-faded uniform, and a face like he's been through 3 divorces and 1 HOA meeting too many, stepped out of his cruiser with a half-drunk coffee and the slow gait of a man who regretted picking up the radio. He glanced at the trucks, then at Grandpa, then at Karen, who stood in the driveway like she'd just been personally offended by the concept of private property. "Well," he muttered, "looks like I've walked into another one of y'all's homeowner standoffs." Karen launched into her monologue like she'd rehearsed it in front of a mirror. "Sheriff, these trucks are essential HOA property containing valuable community equipment. Section 47B clearly allows temporary use of private spaces in cases of infrastructure overflow." She held out a thick packet of printed bylaws like it was the Dead Sea Scrolls. Grandpa didn't even look at it. "Those aren't equipment," he snapped. "They're trucks. My garage ain't a depot, and my grandson ain't your unpaid warehouse manager." Sheriff Duncan took a sip of his coffee and looked at me. I shrugged. Karen spun toward me like a hawk spotting a limping squirrel. "You're a minor. You have no legal standing here." Grandpa cut in. "He's 17, and last summer he fought off a raccoon with a rake and won. That gives him more standing than your whole clipboard army." Sheriff Duncan sighed the sigh of a man who once had dreams. "Karen, unless you've got written consent from the homeowner, HOA rule or not, you can't commandeer someone's garage." She opened her mouth, shut it, then opened it again like a fax machine that couldn't find a signal. "But I'm the acting HOA president," she sputtered. "I issued the ordinance." Grandpa crossed his arms. "And I issued a padlock. Looks like we're even." For a second, I thought she was going to implode or explode or maybe morph into a gas leak. Sheriff Duncan gave them both a warning to settle it civilly, which felt about as effective as telling two cats to share a box. Then he left, coffee still in hand, muttering something about getting hazard pay for HOA calls. That night, I barely slept. Not because I was afraid, because I was excited. I'd never seen Grandpa like that, so sharp, so still, like he was hunting something no one else could see. Around midnight, I heard it, the clink of metal outside. Karen, dressed in black like she was auditioning for a failed spy movie, crouched by the garage with bolt cutters. Then, with a hiss and a click, Grandpa's newly installed motion-activated sprinklers erupted. A powerful jet blasted Karen square in the back. She shrieked like a banshee at a spa day gone wrong and slipped straight into a puddle. The entire neighborhood probably heard the splash and the curse words that followed. By morning, everything changed. Not legally, not officially, but socially. People who hadn't said a word to us in years waved. Mr. Bell from across the street baked us a lemon pound cake with the words Team Frank piped in blue frosting. Someone printed T-shirts. Even Karen's inner circle, the lawn perfectionists and mailbox purists, seemed to back off. But I could tell by the way she drove past that morning, windows rolled up, face tight like she was sucking on a lemon soaked in regret, that this wasn't over. And neither was the mystery. Because when Grandpa opened one of those locked trucks just to satisfy a bit of curiosity, what we found wasn't folding chairs or flyers. It was something else entirely, something that would change everything. Curiosity, they say, killed the cat, but in Grandpa's case, it just made him mad. The moment he cracked open the back of that gray truck, the air shifted. Gone was the smell of metal and motor oil. In its place was something colder, clinical, sterile, wrong. Rows of black plastic bins lined the walls. Labeled folders were stacked with military precision, and mounted to the side panels, monitors, screens, tables. Not a single folding chair or community event banner in sight. "Well," Grandpa muttered, flicking on a flashlight, "looks like Karen's hosting a bake sale for the NS." We didn't speak for a solid 2 minutes, just sifted through the contents like archaeologists uncovering something that shouldn't exist in a suburban garage. One bin contained high-range microphones with sticky notes, porch audio, lot 1619. Another held folders labeled with names we knew, Simmons, Huang, Delgado, each paired with odd notations, violation, history, fence, footage, dispute leverage. Some had photos zoomed in, personal, taken from angles you couldn't just walk by and snap. One was of Mr. Simmons pulling out weeds in his boxers. Another showed a woman crying in her car. Grandpa's face darkened. "This isn't surveillance," he said. "It's leverage." We found a file marked Miller Contingency Plan. Inside, a timeline. Every fine Grandpa had ever ignored. Every sarcastic note he'd mailed back, every HOA meeting he skipped. The final entry read, "If active resistance escalates, initiate Plan Echo." It wasn't just creepy, it was structured, thought out. This wasn't Karen being nosy, it was Karen building a system. A quiet, untraceable power structure designed to control people. One garage, one flower bed, one HOA violation at a time. Grandpa looked at me, jaw clenched. "We're not dealing with a power trip anymore," he said. "This is infrastructure." We sealed the truck back up, locked the garage, and retreated inside. Grandpa spread the folders across the kitchen table like he was assembling a crime board for a Netflix documentary. And honestly, that's what it felt like. He had diagrams, pins, string He even dug out an old cork board from the attic and used it to map connections between names, addresses, and fines. At one point, he paused, holding up a photograph of a fake rock with a camera lens hidden in it. She's got him installed as lawn decor, he muttered. Spy garden, chic. Unbelievable. I asked him the question that had been boiling under my skin since the garage. Why would she even want all this? What's the point? Grandpa didn't hesitate. Control, he said. She doesn't want a neighborhood. She wants a network. That night, over cold pizza and conspiracy-level tension, we decided we couldn't just sit on this. Karen wasn't just violating HOA etiquette. She was collecting private data on people we knew, people who trusted her. If we called the sheriff too early, she'd bury it, spin it, disappear. No, if we wanted to stop her for good, we had to be smart. We had to set a trap. You can't shoot a ghost, Grandpa said, tapping the corkboard. You lure it out with unfinished business. I didn't know exactly what that meant at the time, but I could feel it in my gut. We were about to become very unpopular with the HOA. And things in Briarwood Hills were going to get a lot weirder before they got better. The next morning, Grandpa named it Operation Neighborhood Watchdog. He said it with the straight-faced seriousness of a military briefing, standing in his bathrobe while drinking coffee out of a mug that said, "World's okayest Grandpa." The goal was simple: bait Karen. Lure her into overplaying her hand, get it all on record, and expose her to the community before she could hit the shred button. We don't need speeches, he said, pinning another photo to the corkboard. We need theater, and lucky for us, she loves center stage. Our first move was choosing the right decoy, the Kingsleys, Harold and June, retired, nosy, and proud of it. They didn't like drama, but they liked being involved in everything. We sold them the mission like it was a neighborhood soap opera. Their role, simple: commit a series of blatant Karen baiting violations, trash bins left out for 3 straight days, lawn sprinklers running during water restriction hours, and the centerpiece, a 5-foot inflatable flamingo wearing sunglasses and holding a margarita. The flamingo naturally had a tiny camera mounted in the shades. Karen wouldn't be able to resist. And right on cue, she didn't. Day 3, 8:14 a.m., she appeared at the Kingsley's front walk in full HOA regalia. Pink blazer, clipboard, and an expression like she just smelled expired yogurt. She squinted at the flamingo, muttered something under her breath, then began snapping photos like a TMZ reporter at a celebrity meltdown. What she didn't know was that the flamingo was capturing everything: her grumbles, her threats, and most importantly, her little side detour into the Kingsley's mailbox. She reached in, pulled out a folded envelope, scanned it with a pen light, and stuffed it in her purse. The flamingo blinked red, recording. Back at our house, Grandpa and I watched the footage like we were analyzing enemy surveillance. When Karen rifled through that mail, he paused the video and zoomed in. "That right there," he said, "that's a felony, mail tampering." And she just did it in broad daylight, on camera, in flamingo vision. I nodded slowly, already imagining the montage of this moment in some future courtroom documentary. "You think she's getting nervous?" I asked. Grandpa smirked. "Son, she's sweating bullets, but she's too addicted to control to walk away. That makes her predictable, and predictability is how you end tyrants." We weren't done. To really get ahead of her, we needed access to her nest, the HOA Central Command. Not the trucks, not her Lexus. The garage, the one at her house that had been slowly morphing into a miniature data fortress. That was where the backups were, the originals, maybe even the HOA slush fund files Grandpa was convinced existed. We needed eyes and hands inside, so Grandpa did what any reasonable person would do. He assembled a team. "Every great plan needs weirdos," he said, and by evening our squad was ready. An ex-magician with a vendetta against HOA height limits, a TikTok influencer who once snuck an emotional support goose onto a plane, and a cat lady who spoke in grumbles and claimed Karen fined her for unpatriotic meowing. The infiltration was set to happen during the annual HOA Disco fundraiser. Karen would be busy flexing her community leadership muscles, which meant, for the first time ever, her garage would be vulnerable. Grandpa leaned back in his chair, laced his fingers together, and grinned. "Time to see what secrets the Queen keeps behind closed doors." The night of the HOA disco fundraiser arrived with all the subtlety of a midlife crisis in sequins. The Briarwood Hills Community Center pulsed with colored lights, fog machine haze, and Bee Gees remixes. Karen stood at the entrance like a cruise director drunk on power, greeting neighbors with that tight-lipped smile she reserved for people she thought were beneath her, which was, well, everyone. She wore a glittery pantsuit so aggressively pink it could have been weaponized by the military, and held her clipboard like a royal decree. "Welcome to the 12th Annual Harmony Disco Night," she announced, "because order can be fun, too." Nobody clapped. The fog machine sputtered. As the party peaked, someone's Uncle Randy doing interpretive disco, and a man in bell-bottoms spinning a glow stick like it owed him money. Our team slipped away. The Goose Girl led the way with her emotional support bird, General Honk, in a baby stroller, serving as both decoy and distraction. Mr. Dawson, the ex-magician, had the lock picked on Karen's garage in under 3 minutes using a paperclip, a bobby pin, and a cinnamon-flavored toothpick. Debbie, the cat lady, kept lookout by pretending to walk 3 invisible cats. The whole thing felt less like an infiltration and more like a failed sitcom pilot. Inside the garage, the tone shifted. Gone were the suburban decorations and normal clutter. In their place, corkboards covered in maps of the neighborhood, violations marked with red yarn and thumbtacks, a whiteboard titled Behavior Watch List, boxes labeled flag violations, and one chillingly vague bin, non-compliance. In the corner, a tall black filing cabinet buzzed with a subtle hum, locked, sealed, and clearly not meant for public eyes. Dawson cracked it open in 5 minutes flat, muttering something about how locks these days lacked character. Inside was a trove of documentation so damning it almost glowed. There were 5 years' worth of financial records, only half of which matched up with the public HOA budget reports. Surveillance purchase receipts disguised as beautification efforts. Hundreds of photos of front lawns, backyards, even inside windows, and one small thumb drive labeled Insurance, Karen Only. Grandpa didn't hesitate. He slipped it in his coat pocket like it was a golden ticket. "We're done here," he said. "Let's vanish before she finishes her 3rd wine spritzer and decides to do the Macarena." Back at the house, we plugged in the drive and braced ourselves. What we found made everything before feel like a warm-up. Audio files, dozens of them. Conversations recorded from porch mics, backyard monitors, even some that seemed like they'd been captured inside people's homes. Files with detailed notes, birth dates, medical conditions, job statuses. Several folders marked influence risk and compliance probability. Karen wasn't just tracking violations, she was profiling people, building psychological maps of the neighborhood, anticipating behavior, exploiting weaknesses. The most unsettling part was a series of folders with names of people we knew, Mr. Bell, the Kingsleys, the Simmonses, with sticky notes like mortgage fragile, son in legal trouble, pending foreclosure. It wasn't just controlled anymore, it was manipulation, blackmail or the threat of it. Then we found the folder labeled Miller. Grandpa opened it. Inside, one sheet, a list of all his past HOA conflicts, his influence risk rating, and a final line, engage plan if signs of rebellion continue. Grandpa read it, then said nothing, just sat back, eyes narrowed, knuckles white around the paper. "She thinks she's the spider in the center of the web," he muttered. "But she forgot one thing." I asked what. He looked at me and grinned that same sly, dangerous grin he used when beating the mayor at cornhole blindfolded. "Spiders don't do well in spotlight." Grandpa didn't sleep that night. I heard him pacing the kitchen around 2 a.m., talking softly to himself like he was arguing with ghosts. By sunrise, he had a plan, and it was classic Frank. Bold, simple, and just unhinged enough to work. "We don't take her down with speeches," he said, flipping open a yellow legal pad filled with scribbles, arrows, and something labeled Karen Trap Alpha. "We let her bury herself. All we do is handle the shovel and smile." I raised an eyebrow. "What kind of shovel are we talking?" He grinned. "The kind she can't resist digging with." Rumor. So we planted it. A letter professionally printed, folded, and slipped inside a half-crumpled envelope addressed to Grandpa from a fictional real estate firm. Inside, it stated in official-sounding legalese that the Miller residence was being considered for a sale to a development company. one interested in turning our modest home into a duplex. It was the suburban equivalent of announcing you were opening a biker bar next to a preschool. We left it barely tucked into the top of our recycling bin, half covered, just enough to tempt someone curious or nosy enough to dig. And Karen, God bless her obsessive heart, couldn't resist. That evening, the flamingo cam lit up. Karen, under the cloak of dusk and with the precision of a raccoon at a trash can buffet, crept into our yard. She wore black again, of course, and carried her little pocket flashlight like she was reenacting a scene from suburban CSI. She pulled the letter from the bin, scanned it slowly, and took a photo before storming off with the fury of a woman betrayed by zoning laws. The next morning, a crisp, official-looking notice was taped to our door. Pending structural violation review. Possible instability detected. Unauthorized structural change in violation of Bylaw 37F. Grandpa read it aloud, chuckled, then used it to scoop cat poop out of the flower bed. But we had the footage, Karen committing mail fraud, issuing threats based on fabricated information, acting as if our home was HOA property to inspect at will. Now we needed to go public. Not with drama, with receipts. Grandpa made calls. By that afternoon, a neighborhood meeting had been scheduled at the park. Not an official HOA meeting, but a community information gathering. That's what the flyer said. But everyone knew this wasn't going to be a picnic. This was going to be a reckoning. Neighbors started showing up before sundown, lawn chairs in tow, kids on scooters. Someone even brought a popcorn machine. There was tension in the air, thick like a thunderstorm before the first crack of lightning. Karen showed up last. She strutted across the grass in a fitted black blazer, oversized sunglasses, and that clipboard held to her chest like a riot shield. "I hope this gathering is authorized," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Grandpa didn't answer. He stepped up onto two stacked coolers like they were a podium and held up a folder bulging with evidence. "We've got some things to share," he said, calm but commanding. "About garages, about surveillance, about who's been watching who." The crowd leaned in. Karen's sunglasses didn't hide the flicker of panic. And just like that, the game flipped. The queen was now the one on defense. Grandpa didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He simply opened the folder and started showing things. Photos of surveillance gear from the trucks, receipts labeled safety beautification that actually funded spy equipment, screenshots of camera feeds labeled with house numbers. With each page, the crowd shifted. The Kingsleys gasped when they saw a photo of their backyard labeled Zone C, High Noise Risk. Mr. Bell muttered something about finally understanding how Karen always knew when he forgot to mow, but it wasn't until Grandpa pulled out the printout from the flamingo cam, Karen digging through our recycling bin like a raccoon in pearls, that the murmurs turned into outrage. Karen stepped forward, face pale but determined. "This is slander," she hissed. "You have no idea what kind of responsibility I carry to keep this neighborhood in line." Grandpa didn't flinch. "What you carry, Karen, is paranoia in a clipboard." She pivoted, turned to the crowd, held up her own folder, thick with printed HOA documents. "Everything I did was within regulation. I have the authority. The ordinance allows for oversight." "Oversight," Grandpa said, pulling another photo from the folder, "doesn't mean putting a camera inside a plastic owl on Mrs. Delaney's porch." A few people gasped. One woman shouted, "Wait, my porch?" The crowd was beginning to swell, voices rising like a tide. That's when Julia stepped forward. Quiet, unassuming Julia, Karen's longtime assistant, always in the background, always nodding. She walked calmly, holding a manila envelope like it weighed 10 pounds. "I helped her do it," she said, her voice steady. "I kept the backups. I made the folders. But I didn't sign up for this. People were getting hurt." Karen spun around like someone had yanked her leash. "You don't know what you're saying." Julia didn't stop. She handed the envelope to Grandpa. Inside, USB drives, printed logs, financial discrepancies, and perhaps most damning, email threads showing Karen had sold collected data to third-party real estate developers and local political groups. The crowd went silent. The silence wasn't awkward. It was electric. Karen tried to walk away, muttering something about legal action and forged evidence, but she didn't get far. A white sedan pulled up near the curb. Two men stepped out in dark suits, real ones, not HOA cosplay. One of them showed a badge, the other said her name. "Charlene Delaney?" She froze. Phones came out. cameras rolled. Karen turned slowly, like she still thought she might bluff her way out. She opened her mouth, but no words came. The agents approached, calm and polite. We have a few questions regarding data privacy, unauthorized surveillance, and third-party information sales. One of them gently took her clipboard. She looked like she'd been unplugged. There were no cuffs, no shouting, just silence, and the soft click of a clipboard being closed. As the car pulled away, neighbors clapped, not loud, not wild, just enough to say, we saw, we know, we're done. Grandpa exhaled and sat back down on the coolers. Well, he said, that's one way to end a block party. But I could tell he wasn't finished. His eyes were still moving, scanning the crowd, watching. Karen might have been gone from the park, but in his mind, the battle wasn't over. Not yet, because if Karen had been willing to go that far to stay in control, who's to say she hadn't left behind a plan for what came next? The fallout from Karen's takedown was immediate and oddly festive. The very next morning, someone chalked "Spy Queen Dethroned" in giant pink letters across the sidewalk by the HOA clubhouse. Someone else tied a pair of fake binoculars to the community flagpole. By noon, casseroles were arriving at our doorstep like we'd just won a suburban war, which I guess we had. But Grandpa wasn't celebrating. He sat on the porch, arms crossed, eyes scanning the street like a general after the smoke clears, still waiting for the next shot to be fired. Too quiet, he muttered. Karen may be gone, but I don't trust a tyrant to leave without a tail. He was right. For about a week, things felt unsettled. No HOA emails, no passive-aggressive bulletins about fence height or mailbox paint. But then strange things started happening. Anonymous notes appeared on a few doors, warnings about non-compliant Halloween decor in March, citations for overuse of wind chimes, even a threat to fine someone for having an unwholesome gnome. The notices weren't signed, no official HOA header, but the handwriting was unmistakably Karen's, loopy, aggressive, cursive, like a kindergarten teacher turned cult leader. Grandpa didn't say a word when he saw one. He just disappeared into the garage. 2 days later, our front yard looked like a construction zone. Grandpa set up caution tape, cones, and an old cement mixer he borrowed from a guy named Reggie, who owed him a favor from what he called the squirrel incident of '9. He drafted a fake zoning violation letter, complete with made-up language about structural soundness reviews, and left it half tucked under a lawn flamingo. Sure enough, the drone came back, sleek, quiet, hovering like a nosy little ghost. What it didn't know was that Grandpa had rigged a literal net launcher inside a lawn gnome. Yes, a net in a gnome. When the drone dropped low for a scan, he gave me a subtle nod. I hit the trigger. Thwip! The drone tumbled into the begonias like a shot-down spy plane. We dismantled it on the kitchen table. Inside, a memory card packed with files, videos, notes, even a scanned draft of a new set of shadow HOA rules titled Neighborhood Order Guidelines Phase 2. Karen had been planning to create a black market HOA, underground and unregulated. A fake board, fake rules, real threats. She's trying to build an empire from exile, Grandpa muttered. So we sent her a gift. We printed out every one of her fake violations, tied them with a red ribbon, and placed them inside a cake box labeled, "From your biggest fans." Grandpa left it on her porch at 5 a.m. and taped a note to the top, "Next time, try frosting." 2 weeks later, she was gone. No for sale sign, no moving truck, just gone. Her house sat dark and empty like it had never existed. Rumors flew. Some said she took a consulting job in another HOA across the state. Others claimed she'd moved to a retirement village in Florida with no HOA at all. Grandpa said she probably joined a witness protection program for overzealous suburban tyrants. Whatever the truth was, it didn't matter. What mattered was that Briarwood Hills felt real again. Neighbors talked, kids screamed, decorations came out of closets and onto lawns without fear. The new HOA committee, elected by actual vote, drafted new rules, including a clause Grandpa insisted on personally. No surveillance, no anonymous citations, and absolutely no drones unless they delivered tacos. My grandpa turned down any leadership title, said he preferred being the resident referee, and claimed his only job was to veto nonsense and secure donut rights at meetings. Life returned, better than before. Then, One afternoon while we were cleaning out the garage, I found a dusty old metal lunchbox wedged behind a water heater. Inside, a cassette tape labeled in Karen's handwriting, "For When It's Over." Grandpa raised an eyebrow, popped it into an old player, and hit play. Her voice crackled through, self-important and smug as ever. "You'll miss me," she said. "This neighborhood will crumble without someone keeping it in line." We laughed so hard Grandpa had to sit down. He rewound it, listened again, and then tossed it straight into the trash. "She was wrong," he said, standing up with that same glint in his eye. "This place doesn't need control. It just needs trust. And maybe one gnome with a net launcher, just in case." In the end, it wasn't just about padlocks, drones, or flamingos and sunglasses. It was about boundaries, literal and moral. Karen built a kingdom out of fear, but fear crumbles fast when people start talking, start trusting, and stop tolerating nonsense disguised as order. Grandpa didn't defeat her with power. He did it with community, with cleverness, and just enough mischief to make the lesson stick. That's the real win. In a world full of silent watchers and clipboard tyrants, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is say, "Not in my garage." So if you've got a Karen lurking in your life disguised as authority, cloaked in fake rules, don't fight fire with fire. Fight it with truth, teamwork, and if necessary, a lawn gnome rigged for justice. And hey, if this story made you laugh, nod, or curse your own HOA, don't forget to like, comment your favorite part, and share it with someone who needs a reminder. Neighborhoods aren't built on rules. They're built on people.